Okay, continuing on our journey into defining aesthetic experiences, developing your aesthetics, and understanding how aesthetics influence customer behavior. I just can't reiterate enough that aesthetics is about stimulating our senses, right? Stimulating all of our senses, the senses of the body. So as you start thinking about what draws you, right? What draws you and makes you happy and stimulates your senses, and how they stimulate your senses, you'll be able to use that vocabulary to articulate what look you're going after, right? So here's a challenge, right? The challenge is you work for someone else, right? That you are a designer that works for, I'm going to use my old example. Your designer works for Ralph, and you're not the preppy all-American aesthetic, right? That's okay. In your job duties, right, you will be called upon to create preppy all-American designs. However, you can still bring in some of your aesthetic, because even though Ralph Lauren is preppy and all-American, they do some things that are unexpected, right? They, with one of the lines of Blue Label, they do a lot of abrasion and paint splatter. They do a lot of patches and appliques. They do a lot of bias, cutting things in the bias. Just a lot of deconstruction, which doesn't seem, even in sweaters, doesn't seem preppy or all-American, but they work that into their aesthetic as well, right? So it's really important that your aesthetic experience is going to help stimulate the senses of the body. And really, two people can look at the same object and have completely different experiences, right? You're stimulated from it differently. So if we were to say we were looking at a tuxedo jacket, right? I'm thinking of women. I'm thinking of less smoking, right? The tuxedo jacket. Some can be captivated by its elegance, where somebody's only worried about how much it costs, right? Those are different senses. Different senses. So it's really important that we have some sensitivity, that we can define our aesthetic, and people may not like it. They may not want it or agree with it, and it's okay. That is okay. Because two things can happen, right? And that can help you develop more to find out who your customer is and where to find your customer. And it also may just expose you to something new, right? One of the things I love about teaching fashion is that in the discussion boards, I ask a lot of questions across all my classes. And even me, as someone who's been working in the industry for over 20 years, more than that, like 30 years, I'm exposed to new designers, and the world of influencers is a whole nother topic, right? I'm constantly exposed to new things through the assignments that I give you. So students are turning me on to new things. So it's really important that you continue to grow in that manner. Okay. So next, let's talk about some of the qualities that happens in aesthetics. So some of that stimulation of our senses, and there's some formal, and there's some informal and expressive qualities that we'll talk about. Some symbolic. There's some formal, expressive, and symbolic qualities that we'll also talk about later in this lecture. But that stimulation of senses comes from just attending to the perceived sensory features that we all have. So again, all of our four senses, right? That structure of the garment. So just your initial sensory experience. So what happens when you look at this picture of this model on your screen, right? So are you inspired by her? Do you like the outfit? Do you not like the outfit? Would you wear it? Would you style it that way? The first, your gut reaction, right? And formal qualities take into account those design basics that we're going to be talking about throughout the rest of this class, right? So they take, color, texture, line shape, rhythm, and proportion. Now, we haven't learned what all those are yet. We're getting to those throughout the course of the class. But by the time you finish this class, you will have that language built in, right? So when you see something you're able to express, articulate, you'll be able to use those, right? You'll be able to use those words. So if we look at this, there's a lot going on, but this isn't a flat garment, right? Even on the screen, it's not a flat garment. I feel like if she was walking, we would see some movement in it. We would see some light in it. We would see some joy in it, even though it's black and white. So I think that those qualities are features of any description of apparel, right? And you should be able to articulate that in your aesthetics or the aesthetics for the company that you work for, in the environment that you move forward in as a budding fashion professional. I'm going to keep calling you that. You're a fashion professional, fashion expert. That's the goal, right? Is to be a fashion expert, just to not not just a consumer, a digester of fashion, right? Is to really be able to build your vocabulary, your language, your lexicon is really, really important, right? So in addition to formal qualities that aesthetics takes on, there's also some expressive qualities. And again, it's the emotion that is evoked. Like I say, when I saw Gaga's garment, I was like, yes, like, sorry, I don't want to cuss, but yes, I was like, fashion, right? Same thing when I first saw Michelle Obama, I was like, oh, Meredith Hoop is Michelle Obama's stylist. I was like, Meredith, you can do no wrong. I feel you can do no wrong. Michelle Obama looks fabulous. And then I was underwhelmed by J-Lo. Don't get me wrong, her outfit was, for me, it was attractive. I just feel like it was inappropriate for the moment. I felt like it was, I don't know, it wasn't as somber as the event normally is. And again, these are words that we don't normally use to describe fashion, but I think it wasn't as somber, although her jewelry was right on point. So layers upon layers upon layers of pearls, and a lot of Chanel. Actually, the whole outfit was Chanel. But the Chanel layers upon layers of jewelry was, that I did love. So there were components of it that I love, right? So that emotion that's evoked. And again, as we dig into these principles of design, color, shape, and balance, right, can be used to express or evoke emotion. They just evoke emotion of the creator and of the appreciator, right? So the creator had an aesthetic that they put into the garment, and then those of us who love it or hate it, right, has an emotion as the viewer of the garment. So, there's really two explanations here. It's inherent, right? So we just see it and we don't know why we love it. And then it's learned responses, right? So again, when we talk about looking, especially when we're looking at all levels of fashion, looking at fast fashion, ready to wear, haute couture, avant-garde, right? Especially when we get to haute couture and avant-garde, we do have some learned responses, right, of how fashion forward it is, right? How things are moving the pendulum, how things are outside of the box, right? Those are kind of learned responses. And then we add our own lexicon on top of that, on top of those learned responses. And, it's really important that we understand as fashion professionals that a lot of our aesthetic, our expressiveness is only going to be seen by a specific group, right? So, certain qualities are going to imbue emotion in some, and some aren't, and that's what happens even more so when we get to symbolic qualities. And symbolic qualities communicate ideas that just have no resemblance to the ideas that are being expressed. And, the example that we can use is red, white, and blue, right? So oftentimes pride is expressed with those colors, red, white, and blue, because those are the colors of the U.S. flag, and it's a symbol of our country. And for many people, right, it's a sense of pride, and then for some people, it's a sense of unease, right, or concern or consternation, depending on if they feel that America is living up to its actual ideas, right? So if America's walking the walk and talking the talk. So expressive and symbolic elements really do relate to each other, right? They create emotional connections as we're developing our aesthetic. So again, if we go back to the inauguration, in Gaga's garment, the bird was a dove carrying a fig leaf, which is a symbol of renewed spirit and peace, right? So whether you're religious or not, right? When Noah came off the ark, when Noah knew that the flood was over, it was because a dove carried a fig leaf, right? So it's that expression of hope, right? It's all symbolism. So we just think she has on this awesome, amazing Skipperelli couture, and then there's this symbol, right? There's a symbol in there. That was intentional. That was very intentional, right? So with the hope that the country would be brought back together, okay? And again, those symbolic qualities are really important because you can tell a story, right? You can tell a story by the symbolism that you put in a garment, right? You see something with peace signs all over it. You just make an assumption that that person wearing it or the person that designed it wants societal peace, or it could just be kitschy. It could be the exact opposite. So all those things are important when we are expressing those qualities, okay? So in this part of the lecture, we talked about, go back, we talked about stimulate the senses of the body. We talked about those formal qualities, the expressive qualities, and the symbolic qualities. And I'm going to end it here. The next part of the lecture, we're going to be talking about aesthetic experience that can come from products or environments. All right, we'll talk about that next.